Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back for another episode of It's Another Thing Movies. This is episode number 2 of our twice monthly or thereabouts close to podcast covering new movies as they drop on streaming services around the internet. Typically, more often than not, they are movies as they drop on Netflix, but we do reserve the rights and license to check out additional streaming services as well. Here with me, as always, are my intrepid companions in the journey through online digital media. Mr. Jonathan Reyes, how you doing, Jonathan?
I'm doing well. I'm actually really looking forward to talking about this movie. It surprised me.
Good, good. And Mr. Peter Morrow, how are you doing, Peter?
Doing good.
Good, awesome. We were all able to join via the wonder of the x86 platform tonight. Nobody had to join from their mobile phone, so I'll count that as a stroke of good fortune. So tonight we are going to be talking about Scott Pilgrim versus the World, a movie which I had seen once before, but had not revisited since. It dropped on Netflix in the middle of last month, so about the 16th of September. So one thing I wanted to ask you guys is, are you guys familiar with the history and kind of the cultural mythology behind this particular property? And did you know about that before the first time that you watched the movie? And while you're each riffing on that, you can let me and the listeners know, was this your first time watching it, or were you like me, had you watched it before and then you were revisiting it? And then I'm kind of wondering, how much exposure either of you had to it from the origins of the thing in Penny Arcade. And before I let you guys go and run away with it, by the way, this is a spoiler show. This is a review show online, live, and pre-recorded for whichever format you're watching in. But we will be talking about the deep and dark details of the movie. So if you haven't watched it, you may want to go do that and then come back and listen to this. And if you haven't, and you still want to listen, then that's your choice. So, Jonathan, how about you? Was this your first or second time watching the movie? And were you familiar with Scott Pilgrim back from his comic strip days at Penny Arcade?
First time watching it. And I never played, but I never played or I never read any of the comics or anything like that, but I was aware of them. I knew that it had before it was a movie, I knew that it had a comic strip, and I think there was a game that came a little later. But I had known nothing going in. I didn't know what to expect. So I went into it really, really fresh. And so everything was new and exciting and kind of like, what is going on the whole time? But I really liked the way it went about, kind of surprising. I mean, I think it did a really good job of, if there were, say, new people to the property, I think that it did a really good job of introducing you to it. And if you knew it already, I think it did a great job of fan servicing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And how about you, Peter?
I didn't know anything about it, and I don't think that helped. I got lost a lot in this movie. Really had a hard time following it.
So was this your first time watching it?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
So I might be the counterpoint tonight.
Right. So Jonathan, you said you did know about it a little bit. Had you read, and I can't remember, I apologize. Had you read any of like the comic strip at all? So if you're not familiar with the background, I don't know anything about the video game. I guess maybe there was probably like a little 8-bit or 16-bit thing that was created for it. I was familiar with the property from originally it was a comic strip at Penny Arcade, which was the big video game review site before I guess they kind of transitioned to became PAX, and just annually holding PAX has become their main thing. I don't even know if there is a Penny Arcade kind of reviews website that would have been something kind of like IGN, Kotaku are, GameSpot are today. But what I remember, you would, I think it was a couple times a week maybe, but you would go and there would be like a little 5-cell. I want to say it was like comic strip, kind of like a Charlie Brown kind of thing. And the IP was kind of born out of that. And then Jonathan, I think you are right. Then I think it spawned like a side-scrolling video game, and then it got turned into a full-blown movie. So I think a lot of people, who grew up kind of with Penny Arcade and then transitioned into being attendees at PAX, were familiar with it from that aspect. And Peter, if it's the first time, yeah, I'll definitely say I think it's a movie that definitely grows on you a bit when you're watching it for the second time. And it's weird because now I don't know how I would have watched it the first time if it just dropped on digital streaming. Maybe it came out on DVD back when Netflix was doing DVDs. So yeah, but it's definitely a movie that grows on you the second time you're watching it through, when you're a little more steeped in kind of what the mythology of that world is that they're in. So let's quickly run down some of the basics of the movie. So the movie originally came out in 2010, mid-August, which is, Jonathan, help me out. That's kind of normally it's not, I guess it is kind of normally a dead lull in movie theaters. Most of your big blockbusters would have come out in May, June, and July. Every once in a while, there's a last salvo that fires, but generally movies are kind of winding down as people prep to go back to school. So I apologize. I'm still nursing a bad cold from about the last week. But yeah, so it was a August 2010 movie release. So 8 years ago, it pulled in $31.6 million domestic, $16.4 million international, $48 million worldwide off of a budget of 85 mil. So this is a disappointing performer, pulling in just over half of its actual budget. Although it has theoretically scored another 29 mil from DVD and Blu-ray sales, coming up to 77.1 million bucks. Interestingly enough, it was released to theaters in mid-August, and it was in some type of video format, probably DVD, 2 months later in November. So I think the studio and the distributor knew that this thing was not going to sail that well in the movie theaters. It is a PG-13 movie, a 1 hour and 52-minute runtime. I want to talk a little bit about some of the cast trivia, so to speak. So it features Ellen Wong as, what was her character's name again?
Knives.
Yes, right. So this is Scott Pilgrim's teenage girlfriend at the beginning of the high school girlfriend at the beginning of the movie. She goes on and plays, and I can't remember the character's name because I didn't write it down right now, but fellow E2KG Entertainment staff member Dave Pecci and I actually kind of got our start doing a podcast covering the short season format television series Dark Matter by a friend of the show, friend of the network, producer Joseph Malazzi, and Ellen Wong played the principal to I'm tired and sick, so I'm dropping a lot of data right now, but to one of the members of the primary ship's crew, who was actually the outcast emperor of one of the alliance members, and she was his second, basically, in that show. So she needless basically to say, she plays a very, very juvenile character in this movie. She goes on to be a very serious, murdery kind of character in Dark Matter. So it's nice to look back and see this innocent role she played. The thing that jumped out at me, and I put this trivia in here so you guys know it already, that was really surprising, I found, was the number of superheroes that are in this movie. That really kind of jumped out to me as I viewed it in 2018. You have Aubrey Plaza in the movie, who features on the I think FX series Legion, um, about Charles Xavier's son, I think. You have Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who was just most recently cast as the Huntress in the Birds of Prey movie that will be coming out next year or 2020. You have Chris Evans, who has been both the Human Torch and Captain America. Brie Larson, who is now Captain Marvel in the MCU. Mae Whitman, I wrote down. She's not a super. Well, she is a superhero actually for some animated films. She does a ton of voice work. Mae Whitman is the first girlfriend, I think, to I'm forgetting to Michael Cera's character on Arrested Development. And amazingly has she's a very young actress. She's only 30 years old. She has 148 film credits to her name, which is a very, very high number, relatively speaking. So she's been the voice of Wonder Girl in Young Justice, as well as Batgirl in DC Superhero Girls, which is a show that my daughters watch. You had Brandon Routh, who was Superman in Superman Returns, and has gone on to earn redemption for his portrayal of that role by playing the Atom in the Legends whatever show.
Legends of Tomorrow.
Yes, thank you. Sorry. Again, I'm drunk. Yeah. And it was one of my favorite shows on the CW before I dropped off of the CW shows. So, and you have Jason Schwartzman, who I think did he direct this film? I think he was the director, but he came out of being a writer on Smallville. So, a lot of superhero-y comic book here, which I think plays well into this genre of film, as it's kind of in that realm of fiction. Excuse me. And I apologize for the people who watch the archive version of this on the YouTube channel and aren't watching the live show, because unfortunately I have no way of muting this mic, even though I can mute myself in the Google Hangout. So you're going to still hear my coughs in the version of the video and the audio podcast that goes up. So Jonathan, talk to me a little bit about actor chemistry. Were you give me one on-screen relationship that you saw that just really clicked when the characters were on screen together?
Yeah, I really liked anybody paired with Michael Cera. I thought he was really. This was like the first movie I had really. I had seen him in other movies. I can't think of his whole filmography, but this was the first one where I actually sat down and I was really, really stunned at how well he performed and stuff. And it's kind of disappointing to see that he hasn't added to more movies, because I really thought his performance in this movie was really, really, really good. I thought he was the glue to every scene, and he was in pretty much every scene. And anyone he was paired with, be it Kieran Culkin, be it Anna Kendrick over the phone as his sister, I really feel like he was kind of their, I can't think of the word, but he was kind of like he was their soundboard almost, it felt like, where they would just kind of bounce off their lines on him, and he would just kind of, it almost felt like he was reacting to everything they were doing. I just really liked him with everybody. And I felt like he kind of, he would kind of adjust the tone of the scene while still performing the same way. So I really loved the way he performed in this movie. I was just stunned at how, and a lot of these actors, it was like, earlier on in 2010, but like he's on screen with people like Anna Kendrick, who's now kind of a rising star, and Jason Schwartzman, who's a little more well-known now, and sharing the screen with a guy like Chris Evans, as we know now, he's a big, big blockbuster movie star. I thought he really did well in every single scene he was in, with every person he was with. I would say Michael Cera for me, with everybody.
Now, cool. So help me out in kind of defining Michael Cera. Is he kind of I guess part of me is thinking, is he just like the perpetual on-screen straight man? You made that comment, everybody just kind of bounces off of him, but I mean, is that kind of his role in this film, and kind of his. I mean, I guess I would call him more of a character actor than a method actor, right? Because he's kind of the same kind of sort of character every time you see him on screen, and he's exactly that. Like, he says a thing and everybody else bounces around off of it. His line delivery is kind of pretty much the same all the time. I mean, would you agree with that assessment?
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. I haven't seen much of his other work, but from just seeing him in like interviews too. I remember seeing him. I remember when I was watching this movie, I had remembered back to a time where I saw him. He was on with Jimmy Fallon. I forgot what movie he was promoting at the time, but he's kind of the same way he is in person.
Right, exactly.
He's almost the same exact person, and I feel like that helped him a lot in this movie. And I want to actually see some of his other work now from seeing this movie, because I want to see how he performs in other movies, and if he performs just as well, and how the actors perform with him in those movies. But yeah, I totally agree. I think he's definitely not method. He's definitely not being brought into this role, I feel like, to be a character. He's being put into this to be Michael Cera, and the way he's just delivering the lines. It's very, I don't want to go as far as saying it's comedic deadpan, because I don't think he's trying to be funny. I think he's just being himself, and everybody else who is overperforming or performing a character, it kind of fit in with this movie so well. So like for example, Chris Evans is playing this crazy ex-boyfriend, and he's like on this high kind of like dude kind of cocky actor in the movie.
Right.
And what Michael Cera is just being himself, like that monotone kind of character, and it just played off so well, because it's almost like you have this comic booky villain he's facing, and he's just like, oh hi, I just want to date this girl.
Right.
I really like that about it.
Yeah. Peter, any comments on particular actor chemistry that stood out to you?
I think the only thing that stood out to me was Anna Kendrick's performance, because I felt she portrayed kind of what I was feeling. I was just 100% done with this crap. I just I did not like Scott Pilgrim as a character, so and we'll get into that later. She was 100% done with his crap, and I kind of felt the same, so I related to her character in a way.
Okay.
But I mean, Chris Evans was a perfect, just douchebag actor, and the Gideon Graves character, Jason Schwartzman's character, just felt like the greasiest, horrible producer, which was perfect. I think. I mean, I think I liked the villains more.
Yeah, they were kind of a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, they had more than one. What I felt they had was more than one dimension. I mean, even the roommate, I thought was a more dimensional character.
Yeah, and yeah, I can't remember to say which, or the Culkin brother. Yeah, which is kind of.
It was hilarious too, because I think he got up to 3 or 4 different guys in that mattress.
Yeah, no, he had a good shtick, and it's unfortunate I haven't seen, like Jonathan mentioned about Michael Cera, I haven't seen whatever else that Culkin brother has done, but he to me he was a particularly interesting actor whenever he was on screen.
Yeah, he was also Robin in Lego Batman.
Okay, gotcha.
The voice, Michael Cera.
So I think what I'm going to call out for actor performances is I love the sex bombs whenever they were on screen together. That was so there's no secret. I'm a big fan of kind of like the Joss Whedon, like quick, snappy dialogue, where literally, like, if you're not thinking fast enough, jokes will drop and you'll catch up to them like 2 minutes afterwards, right? If you don't immediately grasp it. And I kind of felt like that was the dynamic seemed to shift when all 4 of them were on screen as the band together. It was almost, from a dialogue perspective, it was almost faster paced in a lot of ways intellectually. And I love that. Like I cut like I whenever I saw like the four of them, and unfortunately, you lose that, right? There's a point in the movie where he's really done, and young Neil takes his place in the band, or when he loses Ramona Flowers basically to Jason Schwartzman. Um, and but up until then, it's kind of it doesn't happen. It happens like every island, what, like 20 minutes of the movie, they're on stage together or even in practice together, with the four of them. And I liked how the group dynamic shifted when like they were one thing because it was just the four of them. Then their group dynamic when Knives was introduced, Knives Chow was the name of the character, was introduced, and again they were foils, as you mentioned, Jonathan, kind of bouncing off of each other. And then the group dynamic was another thing that was different when Ramona was introduced, and then there was a point where Ramona and Knives were there together, and that was a slightly different thing. So I felt like it was kind of wonderfully nuanced, that dynamic of the band, that they kind of became, as much as there were different shades, of the fabric when they were on screen, they were also, kind of this singular entity, bouncing off of whoever was the non-homogenous character who was introduced into the room at the time. So I thought that worked really well. Uh, Breakout performances, Peter. I'll start with you.
Um,
And if the look behind your eye, if the meaning behind the look in your eyes is there were none, that is an acceptable answer.
well, no, like I said in my character assassination earlier, I liked the X's. I thought that they had, for the most part, the Brandon Routh, Chris Evans characters. I thought they were pretty decent as far as characters goes. I thought Jason Schwartzman did a almost creepy level job of playing a sleazy producer, which I mean I totally believed it. It didn't bring me out of the movie at all. Just yeah. I mean, I'm not saying anyone was bad. Just it's just like sometimes you're looking for Chinese and you get Mexican food.
Right, right.
But I mean, yeah, I'd say Jason Schwartzman, hands down, was probably my favorite performance because of how much I believed his character.
Okay. All right, Jonathan. Any notes on breakout performances?
I would have included Michael Cera in here too if I didn't say him before. But I would say Kieran Culkin as Wallace Wells really stood out to me because I'd never seen him before. I was trying to figure out who this was the whole time I was watching. I'm like, who is this guy? Because I thought his role was so out of place, but it just worked as kind of like that. I almost felt like we were the viewer. I felt like he was almost the character that was kind of secretly who we were supposed to be as the viewer, as almost like that kind of like down to earth character in the movie where he wasn't really comic booky at all, and he just got it.
Yeah, I feel like in a lot of ways he was kind of the, um, he's almost like the third person narrator of the movie, as you mentioned it. But I think maybe more so, he's kind of Scott's conscious.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
He's kind of. I think we all go through this. Ben in particular, right? We have this part of us that's the adult and the person that takes care of, house, home, finances, whatever. And then there's this other part of us that plays, right? And frequently there's an ongoing war between the two halves, to find balance. And I feel like Scott was representative of that part of his entity that played. I mean, to be quite honest, you could almost pull the lens back another layer, and I would almost say, if the story were told from a slightly different perspective, you could almost get to the end of the movie and go, there was no Kieran Culkin, right? That he was kind of this personality who was really a figment of Scott's imagination, and it was the part of Scott's persona that was telling him to grow up. So yeah, no, I agree with you. I liked Kieran Culkin's performance. I guess breakout performance for me was Mary Elizabeth Winstead. Like I was really, particularly in the closing parts of the movie, as she admits to the flaws in her character. Like the closing scene, it didn't really hit me the first time around, but I really found the closing scene of the movie pretty touching when and I didn't remember how the movie ended when I was watching it, but in the end, Ramona is just going to leave town and continue in her search, and the whole truth of the matter, and she admits it, is that she's kind of lost on her own, that she constantly falls in with bad men. We constantly exit those relationships with bad results. And I don't think it's not a damsel in distress thing. It's just because like I said, there are men and women who are like this, who just constantly find themselves getting involved with the wrong person, and momentarily it looks like Scott is going to stay with Knives, and that the lesson of the movie, or the result of the movie, is that Scott has grown up, and instead of chasing this dream girl who might arguably be considered as out of his league, he's gonna kind of grow up and stay with Knives, who he cheated on and started dating Ramona without really breaking up with her, and blah blah blah. But Knives kind of admits that that the two of them shouldn't really be together, and it's probably a better fit for Scott to be with Ramona. But like I said, what I loved was having Mary Elizabeth Winstead kind of show that introspective view, and articulate those lines as being someone who was flawed and acknowledged her own flaws, while she concurrently didn't seem to be able to do anything about them. Any comments on pacing and length, Peter?
No comment. No. Honestly, pacing was fine. Length, I mean, what was the length of the movie?
It was an hour and 52 minutes. And when I started the movie, Jonathan, I was so angry with you. I was like, what is this trash? And how in the world could they make this comic strip, right, origin, last an hour and 52 minutes? Like, that's as long as a Hobbit movie.
No, I think the Hobbits are longer.
All of them, all three of them. I thought the middle one was like almost more normal length.
I think it just felt like it because it was the better one. I mean, pacing wasn't bad, but you ever watch an old movie and think, "My God, do we really need this bit of silence?"
Yeah, and
there were parts of this movie that I felt, I don't know, are you trying to be nostalgic for the way some movies used to be, where things were a lot slower paced in certain scenes? Or are you just, trying to make it a longer movie? What does the overextended walk outside in the cold scene really do for the movie?
Right, and for me, it was actually while I agree, the 7 deadly, exes or whatever, kind of made the movie in a lot of cases. I don't know that we needed all 7. Like, I don't know. I mean, I guess you kind of do need the scene with the 2 DJ exes who, because that's the band fighting them. So you kind of need that, but I don't know that we needed all 7. Some of those fights drug out, like the Chris Evans fight, I felt like dragged on a little bit.
My favorite fight of the movie, by the way.
Yeah, it was. I still felt it went a little long.
I agree.
And then there was this pause, because then there was dialogue between Kieran Culkin and Michael Cera in between. So I don't know. All I can say is the movie definitely did not need to be an hour and 52 minutes, in my opinion. An hour and a half would have been. Jonathan, have either of you seen Venom? Peter, you've seen Venom, right?
Yeah, I saw Venom.
Isn't that like an hour and a half or something?
I think it's closer to 2 hours.
I think it's 152 as well.
Okay, all right.
I haven't seen it. I'm actually going to see it tomorrow.
Issues there too.
What's that?
Go ahead, John.
Oh no, I'm gonna see Venom tomorrow, so I'll see how I feel about it.
I think there was some minor pacing issues in Venom. You know, there were parts where I thought maybe it could have been cut a little closer, but it's still a good movie. I think you'll enjoy it, Jonathan.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how I feel about it because I'm seeing it almost a week after it's come out, and everybody I've heard is mixed. There's not been a single person that said, "Oh, it's amazing." So I'm interested to see how I feel about it. Because usually when I go into a movie with very low expectations, I'm not going into it very low, but I would say like kind of with almost like no expectations. I don't know what to expect now because I've
That's the
had so many
best.
mixed reviews. Like my dad said he suggested it. My brother said he wasn't sure about it. I have a couple of friends who say it's all right. So, and then I
I've
see the
always thought
reviews. Yeah.
I've always thought no expectations is the best way to go into a movie.
Yeah, so I'll see. I know Tom Hardy's gonna kill it. I know that's more than likely the best part of it. So
so,
I'm
so
excited.
so I feel the same way about that movie as I feel about this one, which is
Yeah.
I question its necessity. And so, Jonathan, um, Peter thinks that there was that pacing was okay. I felt the movie was entirely too long. Although I will kind of admit, leaning a little bit more towards Peter's, but then I hesitate. I would hedge on like trying to pick out scenes that I would want to cut. Um, your feelings on any feelings on pacing or length that differ from either one of those, and then I will let you also go from that directly into your favorite scene.
Yeah. I didn't really have an issue with pacing. I didn't going in just like how I'll go into Venom. I didn't know what to expect from this movie. I really didn't. And I was just pleasantly surprised every minute that passed. I didn't have a moment where I was just like, "Oh, I'm bored," or "This feels too long." I could definitely see what you're saying with some of the fights or some of the scenes that might drag or there might be a minute or two too long or I would say maybe the end fight scene where they do like a flashback and he kind of redoes it because he gets that one up. I think that definitely could have been shortened um, because I felt like they just added a little too much to kind of say, oh, he's realizing everything that he kind of is doing wrong. So maybe that's just me nitpicking though. That's just me looking. I really I had to pause this movie at one point, but it wasn't because I wanted to. It was because I was interrupted. I had a phone call that came in as I was watching it. I didn't want it to stop. I really liked the style of the movie. I liked the way it flowed. It felt like I was watching a comic strip, and it was just I wanted to see what crazy thing was going to happen next. Also, um, so a favorite scene to go off of that into my favorite scene. Man, I would probably say the first fight. I think it was in the. I don't remember his name, but it was the first X, and it was the first time the movie just becomes wacky. I don't remember the
Well,
exact fight scene.
yeah, it's a point. So it's the first battle of the bands,
Yes.
and it's after they've won the first battle, and it really they almost win by default because the first band song is like 10 seconds. Um, but yeah, and I can't remember the guy's name either.
Matthew Patel.
Okay,
Okay.
right. So yeah, I get it, but like you said, the critical thing about this is the inflection point in the movie where it clearly jumps from being what appears to be a relatively grounded kind of teen movie suddenly into this fantastical mythology that the characters live within, where there are comic book / video game kind of fights. I guess I would say more video game kind of fights um, between characters, and we're in a world where somebody like Michael Cera, whose character obviously is very physically imposing, however, is still like this champion level fighter
Right.
in the
Yeah.
movie. So very cool, very cool. Peter, your favorite scene in the movie?
Uh, So it's in G-Man Graves' um, club. He's got to admit to both women that he's essentially been a giant douche sickle to both of them. I mean, and I finally in that moment see that there's there's more than just a one-dimensional loser in Scott Pilgrim. He actually does have the capacity to have some empathy and realize that he has ruined this young high schooler's life for the time being, and he's been messing with a woman who's quite frankly also a bit of a damaged goods at the moment. And you see that hint of empathy in his eyes and that realization that he's just been a terrible person. And it's not because I didn't like his character that I'm picking that out, but it to me it was actually probably one of the strongest emotional parts of the movie.
Well, and when you talk about story progression, right? Classically in film, it is his hero nosedive moment, right? It's
Right.
the moment where finally he's put in position where he has something that he actually has to redeem himself for. It's a little tough for me because the relationship between he and Knives is presented so much throughout the movie as a fabrication, as a thing that is almost not real in and of itself. And then all of a sudden we kind of make this leap that he's been this horrible boyfriend to Knives, which is true, but their relationship kind of is almost presented as if it's a sham in a lot of ways. I
At
get
least
it.
in his perspective, yes.
Yeah, I get it, but it almost makes it feel a little bit like a MacGuffin. Like they just kind of manufactured a thing out of a thing just for the convenience of moving the plot along. But I acknowledge its significance if this is the Odyssey, right? This is the hoop that he has to go through in order to have something that he needs to redeem himself for.
Right.
My favorite scene in the movie, I already mentioned it, so I'm not going to go into it in a bunch of detail. It's one of the 7 deadly X's. Is I think actually 2 of the deadly X's because the 2 DJs, Ramona Flowers actually dated both of them. Excuse me. So they wind up being I think the second battle of the bands that they have to go through. And so actually Scott needs the band to defeat them. He cannot fight them on his own just because the whole situation is set up for them to have to battle the band. And I thought it was pretty cool because the band's kind of like this weird set of losers who suddenly finds themselves being catapulted into stardom and actually starting to believe in themselves. And this is an instance where they kind of get their gumption up, right? And this is kind of the tip over point for them. In a lot of movies, we talk about how the soundtrack kind of becomes its own character. In a lot of ways, we do the same thing with the band in this movie. The band kind of is a character in and of itself where, kind of going back to the, Gen 1 Transformers, right? This is kind of the merger, right? When all 4 of them merge and become this one character. But I thought it was a great scene, partially because of the dynamic of the duel where, there's a bit of time where they are toe to toe with these guys, but then they just get blown out, and you think that they're done, but they actually kind of pull themselves up by their socks and resurge and defeat the 2 DJs. So I thought that was pretty awesome, and I liked that particular scene. On cinematography, I guess I didn't look at this with a fine enough eye to really feel anything particular about the cinematography. I think the things that jumped out at me were it's a very dreary town where it's filmed. I think it was filmed in Canada. The town has a kind of this feel to me of a lot of British television, in particular the Misfits, where I always felt like the Misfits was really weird because it's clearly an actual town on a river, but there seems to never be anyone in the town except the characters in the story. And I'm like, how do you even pull that off as a film crew, right? Like, clearly people live here and work and get up and go to work each and every day. But whenever the Misfits is being filmed, it always feels like there's no more than like 10 other people in the town moving around at the time. And I feel like there's that same similar kind of effect in this movie. It's a very dreary backdrop. And there's things like Scott lives with Kieran McCulkin, Culkin's character, but like their apartment is literally like one mattress on the floor, and it's one room, maybe two. So there doesn't appear to be any affluent parts of town. It's remarkable to kind of believe that anybody actually graduated from any kind of high school from the backdrop. I guess that was the thing that kind of stuck out to me in the cinematography, which again maybe is a good foil towards some of the more fantastical elements. And in particular, this notion that Jason Schwartzman's character kind of comes through in this big limo to find a band and pluck them out to catapult them to stardom. So I don't know, Jonathan, anything stick out at you from a cinematography standpoint?
No. I, when I think about this movie, I don't think it needs to have large cityscapes or anything incredible. I think it purposefully puts it in a dark world, kind of that's gray and dreary, like you're mentioning, so that every time I thought of this movie, I really like its man. I had the word, but it was like very flashy, and I really liked it because it felt like a comic book. And I think that's where it works in this world where everything's kind of dark and drab, and even their apartment is just you walk in and you go to sleep right there. And being able to kind of then turn it into, oh, now he's going to just start jumping and have this kind of versus battle out of nowhere. I thought that really worked with everything being so kind of worn down. And then you have all this flashiness happening that that's what stuck out to me more, was like it kind of, it was almost like switching between worlds. I think it worked that way.
Okay, and Peter, anything from you on cinematography?
To me, you with cinematography, you either have film student, or you have oh God, Kubrick, right? And that's kind of the spectrum. And if it's not a film student and it's not Stanley Kubrick, then I think cinematography is fine. If it falls somewhere in there, if it's not distractingly bad, then I have no problem with it. On the other hand, if it's revolutionary, then it's worth mentioning. And Scott Pilgrim versus the World, I could tell it had a competent cinematographer. The director of photography knew what they were doing. They knew what they wanted, and they got the look I think they were trying to get at. So, I mean, it wasn't revolutionary, but it did what it needed to do.
Okay, cool. Music, soundtrack. I actually, if there's anything that I'm maybe most positive about on the movie, it's probably its music soundtrack. I did like Mary Elizabeth Winstead in the film, but I did appreciate some of the cuts and tracks that they had from the various bands. I don't know much more to say than that. Anybody else have any comments on music soundtrack?
It was a decent, like a garage bandy type soundtrack,
right. Yeah.
Which
it's
again, it fit.
Right, it's kind of what you expect, like
what I'd expect.
Theme of movie to have. Yeah, Jonathan.
Not really. I thought the band music was pretty good. It was good. It was enjoyable. It kind of, especially when the scenes would amp up with the fights, I thought it kind of got intense and you felt it. It kind of engaged you.
Yeah, I will admit, probably a little bit my fault for not paying as much of attention to it. By the same token, there's nothing that like jumped out and grabbed me. Like I was listening to some of Hans Zimmer's track from Man of Steel earlier today, and that really grabbed me, and I was like, wow, that movie had a really great soundtrack, and I didn't really pick it out, but I definitely need to spend some time kind of marinating with that. I don't think this movie was quite that. And of course, I'm obviously not trying to compare this to Hans Zimmer, but my point being, the music and soundtrack kind of did what it needed to do, and as Peter and I said, it's kind of what you would expect from this theme of movie. So now comes the time, gentlemen, where you have to ante up, put your poker chips on the table, and call a formal review score for this movie. Jonathan, I will let you cast the first lot.
Out of 10?
Correct. Yeah, at a 10 with half point increments. So, 1.5 to 2.5, 3.
Sure. Man, I really liked it, but it wasn't, a masterpiece. So I would say
Yes,
8.
and the court allows for differentiation between how you felt about the movie versus your actual review score. You can feel free to articulate those as being different things.
Sure. I would give it an 8.5. The first number that came in mind was 9, but I would say 8.5. Why I feel that highly about it is because I went in expecting to not like it because of it's just not my genre of movie. It is not my cast of people that I would usually gravitate toward. It's not my style of movie that I usually would like watch. It's one of those movies, again, why I love doing this podcast is because the movies we pick are movies I would normally not pay any mind to. And that was when I know it was my choice to pick this one, but it was just one of those movies that when I was looking at it in the list, I said, this is a movie I would never look to watch on my own time. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I've suggested it to people since I've seen it to watch it. I really, really liked it. I'm not too surprised that I liked it now that I look back into Edgar Wright's filmography now and things he's written and directed. I really enjoy Baby Driver. He had a hand in the first Ant-Man. You can see it. I know Peyton Reed took that over, but you can still see Edgar Wright in there. So I really, really like this movie because it surprised me. I would definitely watch it again. The cast surprised me. I was surprised at who was in the movie. And then just Michael Cera really surprised me a lot, like more than anybody in this movie. And like I said at the top of the show, I want to see other movies he's in now. Like, I think that's the biggest takeaway. I want to see other movies he's in, Michael Cera, and I want to see more of Edgar Wright's movies because if I enjoyed this, I think I'll enjoy other Edgar Wright movies.
Okay, and for me, I am going to call the review my personal review score on this. So, Jonathan, you're very fortunate. I was looking for, and for some reason, I cannot access it on the website. But you reviewed Mad Max Fury Road, which, if you remember, you and I did the Fury cast, the spoiler cast for that. And I was trying to find your review score because I think your review score for Fury Road was also an 8.5.
Okay.
So, but I'm not gonna make you point. I'm not gonna force you to awkwardly and uncomfortably point check yourself against a previous review here. I'll get you on that another night. But my review score for this is going to be a 4.5. And again, I wasn't even really. I don't know why. I have no excuse. I always do this to you guys every episode of this show under its previous title and now. I always force us to always, kind of man up and commit to an actual formal score so we can quantitatively declare our feelings for the movie. And I didn't really think it through thoroughly. 4.5 for me is on my lower edge of the scale. If it, when I bounce that against kind of the rubric I use for comic books, comic books for me, I definitely like 6.0 and above are professionally done, appreciated, something that I'm normally glad that I read, that I didn't feel like it was a waste of my time. So this is down at the 4.5 level, which again, if I use my comic book rubric, that's sliding. That's it. That's definitely in bad territory. Now I'm going to say that, and it's largely because this is a movie that I don't feel that I am harmed by if I had not watched it. Right? I really, again, it's a little bit of a thing where I'm like, why? I don't know why this movie needed to be made. I don't know why it needed to occupy time and space. Because it and where I go through bouncing it off of stuff is there's Can't Hardly Wait, right? There are some great teen movies. And again, this is something a little bit different. Excuse me for a second. Sorry. This is something that's a little bit different, but it's still kind of in that vein. And I feel like it's not classic teen movie. It's not from Breakfast Club DNA. But it's still kind of in that vein, and it's a little bit of the zany teen movie kind of stuff. But I feel like there's, Can't Hardly Wait. There is, what is it? Not just another teen movie, which I think kind of hedges towards like the zany teen movie where they take the spoof. It's a spoof, right? But you get kind of a lot of the same tropes that you get in a normal teen movie. I'm pretty sure and confident I could say I would rather have spent an hour and 52 minutes rewatching Not Just Another Teen Movie. I would definitely have spent that time sitting down and rewatching Can't Hardly Wait. Of the only thing, I think the only thing that's, I hesitate to say redeemable, but like a value in this is that you do get to see some kind of clubhouse level, drama club level performances from a lot of actors who have gone on to become our favorites. Excuse me, Anna Kendrick, Chris Evans, even Brandon Ruth to a certain extent. Brie Larson playing a role that I just have not typically seen her in, and kind of getting a chance to ham it up a little bit. So that's just where I kind of come down on the movie. It is not my worst movie that I've ever seen was, I think it's called Extreme Measures, which was a movie, I've called this out before, is Michael Keaton, Andy Garcia. It's one of Garcia's only chances to be the leading man in a movie, which I think, unfortunately, tends to not happen well. He's definitely great as a supporting actor, not so great as a leading man, and this isn't that, and it's not Dream Team, which I think I might call the second worst, but definitely close to Extreme Measures. So it's neither of those movies, but it really wasn't bad. So my emotional feeling on it, Jonathan, is like you. It was entertaining. It was more entertaining the second time around. I'm pretty sure the first time I watched it, I think I fell asleep. Watching it because I was just like, again, because even back then, my feeling was, I don't know why I'm occupying my time watching this movie. Like, I'm not getting anything intellectually out of it. It's not stimulating me to any great depth of thought. There are some neat kind of discussions of the human character in those ending sequences about, like, how are you supposed to feel about people? How are you supposed to feel about yourself? Who are you as a human being? When you're living like that in a town where arguably maybe most of the population just exists and there's not this drive and effort to become more than a thing that you are. Those are some poignant things to be said, and the Mary Elizabeth Winstead thing, right? But other than that, the movie just doesn't really do a lot, other than like the things that I just mentioned, and maybe a little bit of the band again, kind of finding their own center. And if there's a thing that grows in the movie, it's the band, right? They kind of break out from being this living room band, right, to actually coming together as a group and emphasizing all of their talents to be a greater whole. So that's where I am. Peter, your score?
So before we get into my score, I wanted to just bring up a couple of points. So it was bugging me, so I looked up the guy who did the music for this movie, and his name is Nigel Godrich, and he is turns out he's a really, really accomplished, like music producer and recording engineer. Radiohead since '97, Atoms for Peace, Beck, Paul McCartney, U2, REM, Roger Waters. I mean, the list goes on. So this guy has a lot of musical talent, and he knows how to create sound for a variety of different artists, and I think that really shows through in the soundtrack. Like you were saying, Agastocles, this is, and John, I think, both of you were saying that the music was good. It fit the movie, and I think we have Nigel Godrich to thank. The other thing I wanted to bring up was the cinematographer is Bill Pope, who worked with Sam Raimi on the Spider-Man films. He's worked with Edgar Wright before. He did the Matrix trilogy. He's done music videos, and I can kind of see the Matrix in these movies a little bit, and I can also see a bit of music videos in this movie. So
yeah, I definitely
a lot of sense.
I definitely saw some of the Matrix in it. I don't think in a good way. Like it was to me, and literally this was the thought I had. It felt like the Matrix if Keanu Reeves, Lawrence Fishburne, and Moss hadn't trained for a year, right before they started shooting. Like it felt like this is Keanu Reeves if he just walks onto the set of the Matrix and starts shooting bullet time and wire work scenes.
Yeah. Oh, that's too good. I lost my train of thought there. Okay, so my score for this movie, you know what? I'm going to give it a solid 6. I wasn't a fan of this movie necessarily. I don't think it was necessarily for me. I don't think, though, that it was poorly made. And, I got to give props to a cult following, because there's definitely a cult following here. They were able to build a world. They didn't do anything wrong. So I think, this movie is definitely a solid 6 in my book. I'm never going to watch it again.
No, that's a good goal. And you mentioned, cult following. So I will go back and I look at the financials. It earned almost as much from domestic DVD and Blu-ray sales as it earned when it was in the theater. So that's fairly impressive. And I think definitely more people recognize it from its digital and DVD release. Yeah, and I'll just wrap up, kind of revisiting my own thing. I think it was worthwhile for me to watch it a second time. I think I got more out of it. I think it was definitely worth it for me to watch it a second time to settle on my own feelings on it, because it was tough to walk away from it the first time and go to do anything more than I don't really know how I felt about that. So despite my comments, Jonathan, I think it was still a good and worthwhile pick as a study for us to go back and take a look at. So kudos to you for that. Peter, go ahead and set us up for the next episode. What 3 movies, my friend, is it that you were pitching for us to select from and argue about?
All right, so this movie probably did more for race relations than any other movie at the time. It's a groundbreaking movie with a great, strong, black lead actor. Of course, I'm going Mel Brooks, Blazing Saddles. All right, number 2. All right, we've all heard the story of Jesus of Nazareth. Well, now let's look at his neighbor Brian. What happened in the world through his eyes? Of course, I'm referring to The Life of Brian, brought to you by the Monty Python group. And just because it's Halloween, I thought my third pitch would be the movie that coined this phrase. Unlike other Robin Hoods, I can speak with an English accent. That's right. It's going to be Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves with, what's his name? Kevin Costner. So, guys, those are my pitches. What do you think? How do you guys want to go with this one?
Right, so I'm going to go ahead and voice my vote first. My vote is for Robin Hood. When I think about what I want to revisit, right? Because all these are movies that I have seen before. I just Blazing Saddles to me was a thing of a time, and
It would never be remade.
and even though I originally saw it not that much longer after it was a thing of its time, I didn't find any cultural use for it in the canned format it was in. And I know that there's a feeling that it says that it was trying to do a positive thing. I just don't have any use or time for it.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's definitely a dated movie.
Yeah. So again, I will watch whatever the team settles on, right? But these are just my feelings. And then Life of Brian. I bounced off of Monty Python for a very long time, just not getting it. That being said, I eventually came back to it, and there are some Monty Python things that I like. Pretty much just the Holy Grail. So, again, I don't have a lot of like love for spending more time in that particular world. Kevin Costner, Prince of Thieves, for me, dropped at a time in my life. So I was in college. It was a summer movie, I think. It was definitely a summer movie from one of my first summers, kind of out in the world. So I'm interested in kind of revisiting that through an older lens. And it's got a banger cast, right? I mean, Kevin Costner, Morgan Freeman, a great villain. The guy who played Guy of Gisborne, I think goes on. I think The Crow came after this. I could have those backwards, but plays the villain in The Crow. And I think the movie, despite the fact that people dislike Kevin Costner and say things about this movie, I actually think it's probably one of the better Robin Hood films that was made. So I'd be interested in spending some more time with it. Jonathan, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm make it a third vote for Robin Hood. Never seen it before, so that's one of my big reasons about going to see it. Is I've never seen it, never took the time to see it. It's a movie I've been interested in, but never found the opportunity to watch it. So I find it really cool that it's actually available now to go back and watch an older movie like this. I do like Kevin Costner. And I think it's timely too, because the new Robin Hood movie is coming out in November with Taron Egerton from the Kingsman movies. So I think it's timely as well for that point of view.
There's a new Robin Hood movie coming out.
Yeah, Taron Egerton and Jamie Foxx.
Great. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It feels kind of like, it's weird because I feel like that movie, the trailer, it looks to be like. So I don't know if you guys there was a time where like MTV would pick up on certain like A Knight's Tale, and they would do kind of these period pieces, but they would put this rock and roll theme on top of it. I kind of feel like that's what this new Robin Hood is.
Yeah.
But that's okay. I'm down for it. I like Jamie Foxx.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I like Jamie Foxx too, but you don't need a metal soundtrack to have Robin Hood.
I don't know that it has that in it.
That's what Arrow is.
Yeah.
I feel like the trailer kind of evokes this feeling of like this MTV. It feels like MTV got a hold of the Robin Hood license, but because it's like an edgier, darker, very much more combat oriented Robin Hood. But I'm down for that. I'm okay with it. So Peter, the other two co-hosts have picked Robin Hood. I think we're done.
I think you guys have picked it.
So I'm surprised, because I think, Jonathan, you were leaning a different way earlier. So I'm surprised that you landed on Robin Hood. And Peter, I think this was what you didn't expect. You expected us to pick anything but Robin Hood.
I definitely did say that as a joke, didn't I, in the chat? But no, actually, I figured that either I would watch a movie I love, watch a movie I own and haven't seen, or watch a movie I haven't seen yet.
So have you not seen this Robin Hood?
I've not seen this Robin Hood.
Oh wow, okay.
Okay.
So I am going in with fresh eyes. I am going to have no expectations, and hopefully that'll serve me well.
Okay, and when does this drop on Netflix?
It has dropped already.
It has dropped already.
Yeah, I believe it dropped within the first batch of releases.
October 1st. Okay, cool. Very cool. So we will work out viewing and scheduling of this. And then for those listeners of the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, just keep an eye out for when we reconvene. So any other final comments from you, gentlemen?
Yeah. John, thanks for making me watch this movie. I know I was crapping on it, but I actually, from a sociological point of view, found it kind of an interesting look into 2010, because it did have that feel of because that's when web comics were still really popular, and it had that feel.
Yeah, and it was kind of when I want to say Big Bang Theory was just starting to hit its stride, right? So you have a little bit of that, like the geek gets the girl kind of theme going on in it as well, which probably felt timely. Yeah, I don't feel like I wasted my time with this movie, and same thing. I'll echo that. I feel like this is a good pick because without it being picked, I don't know that I would have like found a path to go out of my way to watch this, particularly a second time. So yeah, good call.
Oh yeah, thank you. I mean, for me, it's just another example for me personally where it's just the reason why this podcast for me is great, and I hope people who listen and watch it kind of pick up on it. They don't have to watch what we watch, but give a chance to movies that you wouldn't watch or think you wouldn't watch. Just don't go on the gut feeling of, oh, I'm going to go watch that because it's popular or whatever. Just kind of watch shows or things you might not give a chance to, and you'll be surprised. You'll be really surprised. I was surprised by Next Gen, and I was definitely surprised by this movie. So I'm interested to see how Robin Hood would. Robin Hood more down my line. I just avoided it because it's just. I think it's been. I don't want to say out of date for me, but like, I just didn't grow up during that time. I guess I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, no, it's 19 90 91 movie 91.
Yeah, it's an older one.
Yeah. We'll just
put it up here, 91.
Okay, yeah. So it'll be interesting. Well, thanks so much everybody for joining in once again. This has been Agasically Famous, Jonathan Reyes and Peter Morrow here with episode number 2 of It's Another Thing Movies on the E2KG Network podcasting channel. On behalf of those gentlemen, the E2KG Network, Rounding Off Infinity, and Gearworks.com, that's going to do it for us. We're out of here, and we will be back, and we'll let you know when.